Richard Haldens did not lower his voice. He did not step aside or wait for music to drown him out. In the middle of his son's wedding, in front of more than 100 guests, he pointed straight at me and shouted, "Leave now. My son does not want you here." The room froze, forks hovered in midair, conversations stalled, and the groom's eyes flicked away as if he wished he could disappear. I felt heat rise under my skin, but I kept my expression still. After 12 years working under Richard, I had learned that silence was sometimes the only armor I had. So I turned, walked out of the hall, and let the door fall shut behind me without a single word. My name is Elara Whitford. I have lived in Denver for most of my adult life, built my career block by block, and spent far too long believing loyalty would protect me from scenes like that one. As I crossed the parking lot, my hands trembled. Not from fear Richard had yelled before, but from the way his voice cracked. Desperation hid behind the anger, a sharp edge he had never shown in the office. I drove through the quiet streets toward Capitol Hill, the wedding lights shrinking in my rearview mirror. The humiliation stung, but something else pressed heavier on my chest. Richard's panic had not been about me being there. It had been about me seeing something, or someone. He needed hidden. By the time I reached my apartment, the question gnawed at me more than the humiliation. I barely slept, replaying the moment again and again, searching for the piece I was missing. The answer came the next morning. At 7:14, my phone rang. Richard's name lit the screen. I let it buzz twice before I picked up. "Elara," he said, breathless. "I need the audit files, all of them." The voice I heard was not the same man who had thrown me out the night before. This one sounded cornered. I sat down, gripping the phone. Why now? Richard. His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said, and I knew the real story had only just begun. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revengeaita. It reflects the kinds of power struggles, workplace injustices, and emotional turning points many people face in real life. But all characters, companies, and events are entirely fictional. Our goal is to explore how one woman finds her voice, confronts betrayal, and rebuilds her sense of worth in a world that often overlooks those who stay silent the longest. The phone rang again before the sun finished rising over the rooftops. I had barely pulled myself out of bed when Richard's name flashed across the screen for the second time. No text, no explanation, just the call. I answered on the third ring. "Elara," he said, his breath uneven. "I need the audit files for the Haldens tech expansion. All versions, every draft. Send them to me immediately." There was no apology in his voice. Not even a pause where one might fit, only urgency, sharp and unsteady. "You're calling early," I said. "After last night, I expected something else." "I do not have time for that," he snapped. "I need the files, the entire audit package. Now." His tone tried to reclaim authority, but the tremor underneath it betrayed him. I had worked beside this man for 12 years. I knew what his calm sounded like. This was not it. "What changed overnight?" I asked. "You threw me out of a wedding. And now you're calling before dawn demanding documents." I said I do not have time. He repeated, louder. "Just send them." I walked to the kitchen counter and braced my hand against it. "Richard, those files contain flagged expenses, vendor payments, transfers routed through your son's planning company. They are not something I can just hand over without context." A long silence followed. "Not the thoughtful kind, the dangerous kind. You will send me the files," he said finally. No commentary, no questions. "There are irregularities," I said quietly. "You know that." His breath hitched, just once. "But enough. Listen to me. Elara, those files stay between us unless I say otherwise. Do you understand?" There it was, the fear he had tried to mask all night yesterday, now fully exposed. "I will review my copies," I said, "and I will decide what happens next." "Elara," his voice cracked, but I ended the call before he could finish. I stood alone in the silence of my apartment, the truth humming beneath everything. The wedding had never been about me. It had been about what I knew, what hid inside that financial trail that a man like Richard would burn his own dignity to keep buried. I opened the audit files with the intention of skimming them. Just enough to understand why Richard sounded like a man whose world had begun to tilt. But the moment the spreadsheets loaded, something in my chest tightened. The first irregularity stared back at me like an accusation. undocumented vendor payments, redirected budget lines that bypass standard approval, a transfer of more than $100,000 routed to Rowan Halden under the label Creative Consulting. I whispered the words aloud. Creative Consulting. Rowan had once bragged to me that he never read a full financial report in his life. He ran an event planning company that barely broke even most years. And now there it was, clear as ink on paper, company money feeding directly into his accounts. I clicked deeper into the trail. Each line revealed another gap, another missing signature, another quiet diversion from legitimate budgets. It was a pattern, not an accident. A pattern written in numbers that could not lie. A notification pinged on my screen. Incoming call. Richard Halden. I ignored it and kept scrolling. My voice trembled without meaning to. So this is what you needed hidden. Another call alert. Then a text. Send me the files. Elara? Now. I closed my eyes. 12 years of loyalty. And this was the truth underneath it all. It finally explained the sharpness in Richard's voice at the wedding. The way Rowan refused to meet my eyes. The way Richard shoved me out as if my presence alone threatened everything. I called up the timestamp logs. These transfers stretched back months, possibly longer, enough to trigger federal oversight if anyone outside the company saw the pattern. My phone vibrated again. Elara? Richard's voicemail began, shakier than before. Do not open anything else. We will talk, but I already had. And now that I knew, every line in those files had become a threat to him. What he planned to do next was no longer a mystery. It was an inevitability. I closed my laptop and sat back, letting the weight of 12 years settle over me like dust I had ignored too long. Every late night, every crisis patched at the last second, every spreadsheet rebuilt because someone else cut corners. Richard had trusted me with all of it, trusted me to fix, to smooth over, to stay quiet. Your work keeps this place running, he once told me. You're the calm in the storm. Back then, I thought it was gratitude. Now I heard it for what it had been, a request to never question the storm he created. My phone rang again. I let it ring. A different memory rose, Rowan leaning against my office door 2 years earlier, waving a stack of receipts. Just push these through, he had said. My father already approved it. He always said that. And I had always pushed back. Rowan, these are personal expenses. I had told him then. They cannot go through Halden Tech. His smile had been tight. You make things difficult. Elara, yesterday at the wedding, he would not look at me. Now I understood why. My silence had once protected him. Today, it threatened everything he had built on other people's money. My phone buzzed with a new message. Richard, we need to talk. Immediately. Do not involve anyone else. I typed back slowly. I am reviewing the files. I will reach out when necessary. His response arrived in seconds. This is not optional. You owe me professionalism. 12 years of carrying his mistakes. 12 years of absorbing every misplaced anger, every condescending instruction, every whispered reminder to be discreet. For so long, I mistook that quiet for respect. It was not. It was convenience. I set the phone down. He expected silence again, expected me to fall in line, expected fear. But I finally understood that silence had been hurting me more than any noise he could make. And Richard Halden did not handle losing control well, not when the woman holding it knew exactly how vulnerable he truly was. By mid-morning, Richard had called 4 times, each one more frantic than the last. On the 5th, I finally answered. Elara, he said, out of breath. The investors arrive in Boulder this afternoon. I need the audit files before the meeting. You keep saying that, I replied. But you have not explained why. I do not owe you explanations, he snapped. I need the files. Send them. I opened my laptop and logged into the system. Overnight, the compliance software had flagged suspicious attempts to access restricted directories. The automated audit trail showed multiple failed logins under Richard's credentials. His entire clearance level now displayed a single notice. Access revoked pending review. I stayed quiet long enough for him to hear me exhale. Elara, he said again, forward everything immediately. Do not delay this. You tried to open restricted folders last night, I said more than once. That is not your concern. It is when the system locks you out. He went silent, long enough that I imagined him realizing, in real time, that he had lost the one thing he believed he controlled. "What do you mean, locks me out?" he asked, voice lower, unsteady. "Your clearance was automatically suspended," I said. "As of this morning, I am the only authorized custodian of the audit files." A sharp breath hit the receiver. "Restore my access. I cannot—" "Elara," he barked. "Restore it now." I let the tension settle before I spoke the words he would never forget. "You no longer have access." The silence that followed was different this time. Not outrage, not impatience. Fear. "Elara, listen to me," he said, softer. "You do not understand the position we are in." "No." I answered. "I understand it perfectly." His breathing grew louder, ragged at the edges, as if the walls he once controlled had finally begun to close in, and he knew exactly who was standing on the other side of them. The email arrived just after noon. Not from Richard, not from Rowan, from the Haldens Tech Board of Directors. "Elara, we request a confidential meeting regarding recent audit system alerts. Please come to the downtown office at 3 o'clock. No explanation, no context, just a summons." I forwarded nothing to Richard. He called once, twice, then again. But I let each call fade into silence. If the wind had begun to shift, I needed to see where it carried me before he tried to drag me back. At 3 o'clock sharp, I sat across from 4 board members in a glass-walled conference room. These were people who rarely involved themselves in day-to-day affairs unless something significant had cracked beneath the surface. "Ms. Whitford," one of them began, folding her hands. "The system flagged multiple unauthorized attempts to access restricted audit files. We also saw anomalies within the files themselves. We need clarity." I opened my folder and placed the printed summaries on the table. "These discrepancies span several months," I said. "They include undocumented vendor payments, redirected budgets, and more than $100,000 routed to Rowan Haldens under a non-existent consulting category." They scanned the pages in stunned quiet. Another member leaned forward. "You are certain these figures are accurate?" "Yes," I said. "They are derived directly from the company's ledger and expenditure logs." "What about Richard?" someone else asked. "Was he aware of these transfers?" I kept my voice even. "He asked me this morning to send him the complete audit files privately." A long, heavy pause filled the room. Richard Haldens had once controlled every corner of this company with practiced authority. Today, he was not even in the room. Today, his name hovered like a shadow slipping from a wall. One board member finally exhaled. "Ms. Whitford, it appears we are no longer looking at clerical errors. We are looking at fraud." Their expressions shifted from surprise to resolve, and I understood that Richard was no longer the man demanding answers. He was the man they intended to question next. The investigators moved faster than I expected. By the next morning, they had traced a sequence of payments that left no room for interpretation. The money had flowed straight from Haldens Tech's operating budget into Rowan Haldens' event planning company, and from there into deposits for the wedding venue, catering, and entertainment. When they called me back to the downtown office, I sat in the same chair as before. This time, the board members' faces were tighter, their voices clipped. One of them tapped the paperwork. "Ms. Whitford, this confirms the expenses tied directly to the wedding." Rowan approved the transfers with his own credentials. Another added, and Richard signed off on the categorical reclassifications. He hid them under expansion costs. I kept my voice steady. "Those codes were never part of the approved budget." "We know," the first one said. "And now the investigators know?" The door opened. Richard stepped inside, flanked by 2 compliance officers. His eyes swept the room, then landed on me. Something inside them flickered anger, shock, and a kind of disbelief that I was sitting while he was standing. "What is this?" he demanded. "You are making a mistake. This is a misunderstanding." A board member held up a hand. "Richard, you are being placed on immediate leave, pending investigation. You cannot do that," he barked. "You need me here. You do not understand the damage she has caused." "This is not about her," another member cut in. "This is about the evidence." A second door opened. Rowan appeared, pale and furious, gripping a folded letter. A compliance officer handed him an official notice. "This is ridiculous," Rowan snapped. "Those expenses were authorized." "No," one of the investigators said. "They were concealed." Richard turned toward me, voice low, almost a growl. You did this. I met his stare without blinking. I told the truth. His jaw tightened as the officers escorted him and his son out. And I knew exactly what came next. A man losing everything rarely went quietly. Richard called the moment the investigators stepped away from him. I let the first call ring out, the second, the third. On the fourth, I picked up. His voice was no longer sharp. It slithered. Elara, you have misunderstood the data. Those transfers were standard. You are overreacting. I read every entry. I said, nothing about them was standard. You are not seeing the full context, he insisted. If you retract your statements, we can correct the report internally. There is nothing to retract, he paused, then softened his tone into something meant to sound reasonable. Elara, think carefully. These discrepancies happened under your watch. If this goes public, you could be held accountable too. So that was his angle, shove the guilt in my direction. Smother me with the same quiet compliance he had relied on for 12 years. I kept my voice calm. The audit logs hold timestamps, signature trails, and authorization records. Every transfer shows who approved it. That documentation is already secured. Richard's composure cracked. You think the board will support you once this spirals. You think Denver regulators will not question how you let this happen. I did not let it happen, I said. I exposed it. A harsh breath hissed through the line. You are making a mistake. You cannot win this. This is not a contest. Richard, I answered. It is a deposition. Mine is scheduled for tomorrow. He dropped his voice to a whisper, meant to intimidate. You do not know what you are risking. I know exactly what I am refusing, I said. I will not rewrite the truth to protect you. Silence followed long enough that I heard the sound of him realizing he had run out of leverage. I ended the call, opened my laptop, and continued preparing my deposition. Every document, every log, every line of evidence laid out clearly. The fear he counted on no longer lived in me. And there was one final chain I was ready to break, even if he never saw it coming. The board reconvened 1 week later. I sat in the same chair, hands folded, breathing evenly. This time, the tension in the room did not belong to me. A senior board member cleared his throat. Ms. Whitford, the investigation is complete. Richard Haldens has been permanently removed from his position. He will not return to Halden Tech in any capacity. No one looked surprised, not after what they had uncovered. Another member spoke next. As for Rowan, his actions meet the criteria for corporate misconduct. Legal counsel has been notified. He will face both corporate and criminal review. I exhaled slowly, not out of relief, but out of something quieter recognition. The truth had landed exactly where it needed to. Then the chairwoman leaned forward. Elara, your testimony and documentation were decisive. We would like to offer you the position of interim chief auditor. The role comes with full authority over compliance operations. Richard had once said I was the calm in the storm. Now the storm was gone, and I was being asked to steer the ship he left behind. I met the chairwoman's eyes. I appreciate the offer, truly, but I will not be accepting. A ripple of surprise moved around the table. May we ask why, she said gently. I spent 12 years fixing problems that should never have existed, I replied. I will not rebuild a structure that taught me silence was part of the job. They nodded slowly, understanding more than I expected. I have accepted a position with Meridian Analytics, I continued. They reached out after reviewing the investigator's report. The board exchanged glances. Meridian was a direct competitor, respected, stable. A place where integrity meant something. The chairwoman offered a small smile. Then we wish you every success. I stood, gathered my folder, and walked toward the door. I had no desire for power over the ruins Richard left behind. I finally had something better: freedom. And there was one final truth I needed to say before this chapter could close. I was packing the last of my things into a single box when my phone lit up. Richard Haldens. For a moment, I just watched it ring. The man who once barked orders across entire departments now sounded like someone who had forgotten how to speak with conviction. I answered. Elara? He exhaled shakily. I heard you left. Meridian Analytics, after everything we built. You built your version of it, I said. I built mine. He hesitated. I did not call to argue. I wanted to talk. Without lawyers. Without board members listening. Just you and me. You lost that privilege, I said. His voice thinned. I did not mean for things to end like this. I lost my temper at the wedding. I made decisions I regret. I thought his breath caught. Maybe if you understood my position, you might offer some forgiveness. You humiliated me in front of more than 100 people, I said. And the next morning, you asked for the files that would hide what you and your son had done. You did not want forgiveness. Richard, you wanted protection. That is not fair, he muttered. It is the truth. He swallowed audibly. I do not know how to fix this. I am not asking you to. Silence stretched between us longer than any command he had ever thrown my way. Elara, what do you need from me? He asked quietly. Nothing, I said. I never needed your approval. I only needed my freedom. He drew in a weak breath, the kind a man gives when he realizes every piece of authority he once held has slipped through his fingers. I see, he whispered. Then I suppose this is goodbye. It is, I said. I ended the call, placed my phone on the counter, and closed the box. When I walked out of my apartment and into the crisp Denver air, something inside me felt steady for the first time in years. Life lesson. It took losing a job, a mentor, and 12 years of misguided loyalty to learn that dignity is not something someone else can give you. It is something you reclaim the moment you stop letting fear dictate your silence. Sometimes justice does not roar, it simply removes itself from the people who believed you could not live without them.